My name's Steve Mitchell. I'm an alcoholic. I got a new iPhone, and I'm the only way I'd be in worse shape with technology would be if I couldn't read. So sometimes I can't even get the clock to come on it. I got an iPhone 16. Like I need that, really. That's the biggest one they got, ain't it? I think it is. Did I say my name? Yeah, okay. It's good to be here. I appreciate the invitation, Daniel. That's right. Tom Eilister was my boss in 1997, and Keith Lewis was my sponsor. And Keith was the first speaker when you all got this group going. I don't know if there's anybody that was here then, but that's the truth. So, as I understand it, anybody that's, I got a wife. I've had two wives. This one's the best. But anybody that knows, anybody that's got a wife or a husband knows that truth might not be literal. I had a little deal going with I don't know what made me think of this. Gotten sideways with my wife a while back, and by the time we had this conversation, it straightened itself out. But she said that I would like to say that all of the problem we had was your fault, but I know part of it was my fault. And I know that you would like to say it was all my fault, but you know part of it was your fault. Well, here's what I've learned. I just sat there and waited, but I knew it was all her fault. Anyway, I'm a member of the Principals Group of Alcoholics Anonymous in Raleigh. We're one group that meets 2 times a week. We got a closed meeting on Tuesday night. It's literature-based. We don't do anything without planned, purposeful meetings. We believe, Alcoholics Anonymous is a written program. It's passed on through an oral tradition, but it's a written program. And I've got a sobriety date. It's May 26, 1975. And I'm the most surprised one about that. I remember when 50 days was an impossibility. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, there was no way for me to know this when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I know today I was just right for AA because I had it in my head. I didn't know what I was doing, obviously. I've worked with a lot of people that are new in Alcoholics Anonymous, worked with a lot of newcomers. I don't think many of us come here knowing what's going on. But I knew this much. I didn't know it would make me just right for AA, but I knew this much. I wanted to find some other way to live or I wanted to die. I couldn't take any more failure when I got there. I'd been homeless for a couple years. I was, went to the bathroom, blood came out. When I vomited, blood came out. My feet were all swollen up. I was 25, almost 26 years old. And after I got sober, I found out my physical condition was the best thing I had going. I started to pop back pretty quick. I was young, but I was pretty banged up. But I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't come running towards AA. I came running away from what I had. You don't hear this as much as you used to in AA, but, we used to always say that AA works best as a court of last resort. It probably only works as a court of last resort. I can't imagine any self-regarding alcoholic coming to AA that had any other choice. I mean, AA doesn't look like a very good deal. You got to get down the road a little bit. Got to get under the tent and down the road. When I came to AA, the first person I know that made a serious run at getting me into AA was a friend of mine that had got out of prison again, and I was in bad shape with my drink. He was in bad shape, but he actually pulled me to the side and said that, man, you might want to think about going to Alcoholics Anonymous. It might work for you because you want help. He said, it won't work for me. He'd been introduced to AA in prison. He said, it won't work for me because I won't do what I'm supposed to do. But he said, you might want to go to AA, and I thought to myself, my God, has it come to that? I mean, it's not that bad, is it? I'm going to start out, I don't know why I'm going to do this, but I'm going to try to cover the basis of what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. But I'm going to start out at the end. I don't know if we got any barroom drinkers in here, but I'm sure about one thing. I don't have any science on this, but I swear we've got 20. I've been in North Carolina a long time. I got here in 1989. I swear we've got 15 bars or 20 bars in Nebraska at every bar you got. I go to Nebraska a couple times a year. I've got one sister that stayed there, and my brother-in-law. I'm actually closer to my brother-in-law than my own brother. But they live in a town of not very many people. We'll just leave it at that. And there's 3 bars in that town. There's bars everywhere. I sobered up at a place called Chapter 5 in Fremont, Nebraska. It's outside Omaha. It's a town of 25,000 people, and there's bars up and down both sides of the street. And beside Chapter 5, there was a bar on both sides. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a bar like this, but right up the street on the other side was a place called Bill's Bar. If you ever seen a bar like this, you could have backed a farm truck up to Bill's Bar and put everybody in there and took them to AA, and you wouldn't have missed a person. People that worked in there were drunk. Bill had made his fortune in the garbage and septic tank business, and he bought that bar as a toy for his drunken wife, Phyllis. Now, there was some colorful characters in there. Bill had made his fortune in the garbage and septic tank business. He earned it. He had a lot of pull in that town, and was a good guy. Bill was a real good guy. Somebody get out of prison, he'd make sure they'd get to work. If kids on the south end of town didn't have anything to eat, Bill would make sure they could eat. But that bar, I don't know if you've ever seen a bar like that. It was, you could get in there by mistake, but you wouldn't stay in there by mistake. I mean, you had to be serious about drinking. We had a guy in that bar named Vibrator Hartman, and Vibrator got drunk one New Year's Eve and burned up in a fire. We had a guy named Rodney Montaigne. Now, Rodney got in a fight with a guy in a wheelchair and tipped him over. And the way Rodney described that, he said, he hit me a good one, but I tipped him over before they got me out of there. And we had a guy named Leonard Larson. Now, Leonard had his head set right on his shoulders. He had no neck. And what Leonard would do is he'd get drunk and crawl around on his hands and knees to lift bar stools to perform feats of strength. Leonard went out in the country one day. Nebraska's farm territory. Now, metropolitan Omaha's full of hills and everything, but the rest of Nebraska is flat. It's farm country and a lot of bull haulers that haul hogs and pigs, 48 states and Canada. The railroad is big, but it's country. A lot of old laws on the book. Leonard went out in the country one day and parked his pickup truck and went in a field and shot a cow. And, it's against the law. So Leonard comes out, he needs somebody to help him. He's drunk, but he needs somebody to help him load it in his pickup truck. He waved down an off-duty deputy sheriff. He ended up getting 1 to 2 years for that. I don't know anybody in here who's ever been to that conference they have in Blackstone, Virginia. Has anybody been to that? It's one of the oldest conferences in the country. I've only been there once. I just happened to be the Saturday night speaker that year I was there. I had my wife with me. Now, she ain't an AA, but I've learned that it's good to do what she says if at all possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but if it's possible to stay in compliance, I try to do that. The way that worked today, she said if I would our dog had an appointment for a comprehensive exam. And she said if I'd take the dog in and leave her, when the dog was ready to get picked up, she'd go get it. Well, the way that worked in real time, I get this phone call. I'm in the restaurant with this guy's sponsor, and she said, would you mind picking up the dog? Doesn't seem like what we agreed on, but I said, yeah, I'll get the dog. But anyway, so she's sitting down in the front row. Well, it was a terrible setup, but they had the speaker on the stage, and it was like a couple minutes to 8. And I'd already climbed up there, and the readers had climbed up there, and she's frantically calling me down there. Had a seat for her right in front, so I went down there and said, what is it? She said, real serious. She said, I don't want to hear one word out of you about that guy that ain't got no neck. And I said, Julie, what are you talking about? And she said, and I mean it. I said, well, what? Have you lost your mind? She said, no, look at that guy sitting over there. He got a neck. There was a guy sitting there. But I got out of the military in the summer of 1972. I went in there. I was barely old enough to get in there. But I went in there as a child, and I got out in the summer of 1972. Anybody that's been in the military knows that chaplains got a lot of power in the military. Everybody knows that, but doctors got a lot of power. And a very kind doctor kept me from getting kicked out of the military. So I wasn't long out of the military. I showed up at Bill's Bar. My dad's still alive. He's a drunk in Bill's Bar. I know a lot of people. I was raised in that town. About the same time I showed up, 2 brothers named Billy and Tommy Walker showed up. Now, when I first met Billy Walker, now, if I said that, this happens all the time with newcomers. If somebody tells you something that's plausible, it could be true, but it probably isn't. That happens all the time with newcomers. So I just wait and see what happens. But when I met Billy Walker, he told me he was just out of the 101st Airborne. Well, I'm a snot-nosed drunken kid. I don't know anything, but the first thing that hits me is this guy's coming from a prison somewhere. You just get that. You ever get that sensation like, you get a new girlfriend and She don't tell you she's married, but there's symptoms to that stuff, right? And the last few years of my drinking, now this doesn't make any sense, just to show you how far off I was. I wanted any girlfriends I had to be married. And the reason why I had it in my head is they had to do a lot of stuff for you, but they couldn't expect much. Now, some of that's true, but it doesn't make much sense to operate that way. But anyway, Billy and Tommy Walker showed up about the same time I did. Now, in summer of 1972, I'm a beer drinker, but I'll drink anything. And at that time, I could literally drink 24 or 30 beers, whatever. I could drive a car, I could talk to people. I'd be drunk, couldn't pass a test, but I'd know what happened. But you let me take one drink of Mad Dog with that or one shot of whiskey, I just never remember. So the Walker boys show up, 1972, about the same time I did. And they claim to be from Texas. The bar ain't exactly about honesty. I have no idea where they're from. But I like to drink with them for a couple reasons. One reason is when I'm drinking, I got a big mouth. I'm a coward and my size is against me. Now, Billy Walker ain't any bigger than me, but he attacks people. He looks like that dog on the Greyhound bus. I ain't seen many Greyhound buses lately, but I was in traffic. I was on Falls of the Noose the other day in Raleigh, right beside a real new, like a big, sleek Greyhound bus. I hadn't seen one in a long time. There was that dog on the side. That's how Billy Walker would look. When he'd fly on somebody, he'd fly on them, knock them out. That'd be the end of it. And the other reason, he never was any bigger, and he's not even bigger than I am right now, ever. And the other reason I like to drink with him, I've seen a lot of guys could get a lot of girls, but Billy, I've only seen two men in my life, as best I could tell, they attracted women. You know what I'm talking about? They didn't have to do anything. They just went wherever they were, and then the next thing you know, there's women there. So as I look back on it now, I must have just been drunk, not stupid. Because I thought, well, I don't think I ever abstracted this, but my idea must have been, I'll stay here with you, Billy, and possibly get in on some of the overflow. Now, this is the kind of brains now, Billy Walker drank dry gin and chased it with squirt. Tommy Walker drank bar whiskey and chased it with water. So when I started drinking with him, I started drinking that gin. Now, this is the kind of brains you had in Bill's bar at that time. This is what Billy Walker told me. He said, the way we're drinking this gin, there's a couple things you got to remember. He said, you always get the gin in a shot glass by itself, and then you ask for another glass of chaser, and you get squirt, just a kind of soda. And he said, as soon as you belt the gin, don't breathe, because it's nasty. Anybody's drank any dry gin, particularly if it's hot, you know he's telling the truth. You get a good pull on that, and you ain't about half drunk, it can gag you. It'll just send shivers through you. It's nasty. So he said, as soon as you swallow that gin, you belt that squirt. I said, okay, Billy, that's fine with me. Made sense. But the other thing threw me a little bit, and he said, you got to start to use a lot of pepper on your food. Now, we ain't eating much in those days anyway. I said, what will that do? Then this actually happened. This ain't some kind of just made up story. I said, what will that do? And he said, well, the way we're drinking this gin, it can hurt your liver. But if you use a lot of pepper on your food, it'll counteract it. Now, I sponsor two people that sponsor doctors, and we've made a lot of hay over the years about that. As far as they know, there ain't nothing to that. But they were in there, and so the place was just kind of a pandemonium. Well, here's what happened. In 1974, for years, when I heard, if you read Bill Wilson's story in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, that's his perfect outline to explain the progressive nature of the illness as you'll ever find. I've never seen another thing written that talks about the progression of the illness better than that. So for years, when I talked about the progression of the illness of alcoholism, I talked about how the drinking was getting worse, which is the main thing. It's half our name, right? But there's a lot of other stuff going on with progression. If I had this is just my take now. I'm not an expert. I don't speak for Alcoholics Anonymous. But if I had to describe alcoholism in one word, the word I would use is fear. That's the word I would use. Bill Wilson said that resentment is the number one offender. I wouldn't argue that point, but obviously in my life, they're the biggest problems I've had. My problems are always about the past or the future. I'm either mad about something that's happened in the past or resentful, or I'm afraid of what's going to happen in the future or not going to happen. There was a guy one time that said, it sounds lofty when you think about this, but it's incredibly pragmatic. He said, think about the spiritual life like this. He said, there ain't no past and there ain't no future. All there is eternity, and you're pulling it right now. It's always right now. That's where I'm safe. You hear all the time in meetings people say they're at their best when they're working with another alcoholic. Well, the reason I think that's true is because we forget we're there. We're just trying to give something. We're trying to be a servant. When I was new, there used to be this guy in the meetings. He used to say, if you don't drink today, you'll never drink. And I was sitting in there, I'd say, man, that's heavy. I wonder what he means by that. And then he'd say, today is the tomorrow you worried about yesterday. Man, that guy's deep. Well, we're supposed to be living in the power right now. That came right from the Bible. Bill says in his writings, and Dr. Bob talk about, that we got our principles from men and women of medicine and religion. That one day at a time came right from the Bible. And if I've missed anything in AA, big time, I've done a terrible job of living one day at a time. And I haven't observed very many other people that do very well with it. It seems like it's just so, it's very difficult to live, but that's where I'm safe, in the power right now. But anyway, fast forward, November 1974. I'm just back from California again. I've been going to California since I was a 15-year-old kid. In my family, on both sides, none of it was, I grew up in middle-class circumstances. Good, honest, hardworking people. Serious alcoholics. But I say honest in terms of hard work, right and wrong, that kind of stuff. It's not the kind of honesty that will get you sober. It's the kind of honesty like if somebody needs help, you try to help them, or if they give you too much change in the store, give it back. You know what I'm talking about? I was introduced to that, never afflicted with it, but I heard about it. But anyway, so I'm back from California again, and this lady in the bar, her and her boyfriend invited another guy and I to their house for Thanksgiving dinner. Now I'm real sick now, and I think this proves the point that a power greater than ourselves can do his or her work anywhere, Park Avenue or Park Bench. It doesn't matter. Somebody can get sober in prison as well as they can get anywhere else. I mean, if the magic comes together, it's like a garbage can catching on fire. If all the elements come together right and ignites, then something happens. But anyway, they invited us to their house for Thanksgiving dinner. Now, the other guy, I'd been in a terrible tractor-trailer accident with him. I was in the sleeper. I was passed out, but I slept through the entire thing. I didn't even know there'd been an accident. And my friend that was driving the truck said that he watched the trailer come around in the mirror and hit. He said, when it jackknifed, he said didn't even spill the beer between his legs. And I slept through the whole thing. There was the fuel tank on the driver's side was ruptured, and there was diesel fuel all over the highway, so the fire trucks were out there. Highway patrol was out there. He told me to put all the beer in the sleeper. I don't ever remember. I slept through the whole thing. Nobody knew I was there, including me, except I guess the guy driving the truck. But anyway, he was the guy driving the truck. Well, this couple invited him and I to their house for Thanksgiving dinner. And Libby made a beautiful Thanksgiving dinner. She had her kids in, and her boyfriend was a bull hauler on the 48 states in Canada. And Libby was my friend. That's how come we got invited. And I'll tell you what a rough bunch this was. Sal, the bull hauler, her boyfriend, wanted to marry her. So Libby he took her over across the river into Iowa to meet his mom. And Sal went to the bathroom, and Libby told me his mom pulled her into the kitchen and said, honey, I want to give you some advice. She said, you get away from that drunken bum as quick as you can, because he'll ruin your life. Now, that's his mom talking. So you got a rough bunch here. But anyway, Libby knew about Alcoholics Anonymous. So I don't eat. I'm too sick to eat. When I wake up, it's taken like, you know how you sleep like that, but it's fitful. You don't really sleep. You're awake and asleep at the same time. And I wake up and I'm hemorrhaging blood. And I'm trying to get well. I try to sip some beer, and I'm constantly throwing it back up. Well, what happened after about 3 days of that? Libby sat me down and she said essentially this. She said, I've been around alcoholics all my life. I've been married to 2 alcoholics. Now, you got to remember, Libby and her boyfriend were permanent party in Bill's bar. So they were alcoholics. And, but she said, I don't think I've ever seen anything like you at your age. I was 25. And she said, If you want to, there's a man in town that helped my last ex-husband, and my last ex-husband's sober 1 year. He's got a full-time job, he's paying his child support, and he's doing really well. If you want me to, I'll call that guy. Now, if I were to say I'd been looking for a way out already, you know what I'm talking about, right? You know how we're flirting with that. That's why I've always thought that's why newcomers are so mad at God when they get here often. You know, they often say they don't believe in God. Well, maybe that's true once in a while, but my experience is they're mad at God. And it makes some sense. We've tried to get help. It hasn't worked. It's been misguided help, but we've tried. So, but I'd been looking for a way out. Now, this is the plans I had at that time. One was I was going to marry a rich woman. It's not looking good for the home team. That's probably not going to happen. I was walking through this place one day, and there was these two women sitting in this thing, and I heard one of them say to the other one, said, "Oh, there's that boy that carries a toothbrush in his pocket." I mean, where are you going to go? I mean, how are you going to take it? I don't even have a bicycle. The other plan I had a plan to get a job, but it was always going to be tomorrow. And what I was going to do tomorrow when I woke up is I was just going to sip a little bit of beer. I wasn't going to drink any booze. I was going to sip a little bit of beer to take the edge off, and then I was going to go get a job. And that made sense day after day. My third plan, which I submit was a lot more likely, that I was going to kill myself. I don't know how many people in this room are watching this, but percentage-wise, if you bust everything down like those people who studies percentages and all that, more alcoholics commit suicide sober than ever do drinking. I've sponsored 2 people in my sobriety that have committed suicide sober. One at 8 years and one at 33 years. And it doesn't happen much in an area periodically, but if you go around the country a lot, it's going on a lot. People know about it. Like when Tom Ivester was traveling the country, he knew about it. He was running into it all the time. I've always wondered what the difference is between the man or woman that's been sober a while that takes a drink to take the edge off. They can't take it, it's so dark, or the person that commits suicide. The only thing I could ever figure is the one that takes the drink must think there's at least some short-term relief in that, and it must be awfully dark for something like that to happen. But I think the reason that I didn't do that is I was afraid I'd end up a vegetable or a plant, and it wouldn't work, and then I'd be laying around for the next 30 years in a diaper or something, paralyzed. So, but anyway, on November 30th, 1974, the first 12-step call that was ever made on me was made by a guy by the name of Bob Brannigan. He's still living, sober 60 years. And he can't get out to meetings anymore. Until recently, they'd been bringing meetings to his house, and his elements going out. But I guess the reason he stayed sober all those years is he continued to do the stuff that he did with me. That November 30th, he made the first 12-step call on me that was ever made. It was on a Saturday. He spent all Saturday afternoon with me, and what he essentially did is he told me what he used to be like, what happened to him, and what he was like now. I don't remember a lot of what I said. I remember very few things, but I remember this. I remember him saying that he'd had a wife and 5 kids, and he was a sheet metal worker, and he'd build them a new home. He traded disciplines with all the work he knew. It was a small town. They built a new house for him and his family. And he said, I lost my family and the home. And I remember him saying, and I should have lost it. I was a little confused with that. That didn't make sense to me. And I also asked him how long he'd been sober, how long since he drank, and he said, if I can make it till September, it'll be 11 years. And the other thing, the question I asked, I grew up in serious alcoholism. My dad was as bad a case of alcoholism as I've ever seen or heard. He hated AA. In fact, he made this statement. He told my aunt, one of his sisters, he said, if anything would make a man drink, AA would do it. And he said to me the first summer I was sober, he said, well, the problem with you, he said, you went from one extreme to the other. I didn't know enough, but if I'd have known what I was doing, I could have said, I think that's the idea here, Dad. I've been drunk, and now I'm not drinking. But anyway, Bob Brannigan made this call, and then December 1st of 1974, he carted me off to the state hospital. And the state hospital was a couple, 3 hours away, and it was full mostly of people that were homeless or from prison. And on the way, I've never forgot this, on the way, he had one of those great big Oldsmobiles that probably Probably costs about $3 to start one of those things today. You remember those things and those Pontiacs, the hydromatics? You could hear them shifting. They had an Indian head on them. So we're out on Interstate 80, headed to the state hospital, and he stopped and he bought me a carton of cigarettes, smoking in them days. And I needed a drink bad. I was all cramped up. I didn't get a drink, but he bought me a can of 7-Up and a carton of Marlboros. And I laid that great line on him. You know what it was? I'll pay you back. And I remember him looking over at me and he said, that ain't the way this works. You'll be expected to help someone else when you're able. So here's what happened. Fast forward, I didn't stay sober. I got drunk in the state hospital a couple times. I got out, I got back in jail, then I got back in the state hospital again. But here's what happened. I'm going to get to the chase on this and get sober. Memorial Day weekend, May 26th. You know, everybody knows that Memorial Day Monday is a state and federal holiday. Well, I woke up at 2 a.m. I had 2 bottles of wine, but I couldn't find them. You ever hide a bottle from yourself? Now that's a revolting development. You know you got booze, but you can't find it. I asked later, one of the guys, all these guys that I was drinking with are dead now, but I asked this guy, Roger Allen, I think he went out first. I don't think he probably didn't make it past 26. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, you know, we were riding around with Richard, and you know Richard's nerves are bad. That could not be argued. Richard's nerves were bad. And he said that Richard kept telling you to shut up. You wouldn't shut up, so he hit you. I said, I always did really good with Richard. I said, Richard hit me? He said, yes. Right in the mouth, hard too. I said, what did I do? He said, you started crying. But anyway, Richard drank, I had those 2 bottles of wine, and there was some other stuff there where they drank it. But anyway, I didn't have any idea what had happened. But here's what happened. I'm not sure when, but in that little period of time, my great aunt invited me to come and live with her. Now, I told you I come from big money on both sides. I have a great aunt and uncle who have their name on a building at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. And I was at an AA conference up in Massachusetts, and on Saturday afternoon we were at a picnic, and one of the women, she's just an AA member, but she was sitting next to me, and she told she was the vice president of finance at a local college. So I was telling her about my aunt and uncle in that building at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. The building as big as this church. And I said, I guess they'd have to give a couple, $3 million to get their name on a building there, wouldn't you? And she said, oh, no, like 18 or 20 million. So big money on both sides. Now, none of that money was never meant for me. I never drank any of that up, none of that. But there was opportunity. There was opportunity which I never took. The people that raised me they were good, honest, hardworking people, but alcoholic and delusional as far as the illness of alcoholism. I mean, it was just, you know, my grandpa, this is the kind of honesty and I don't know how you describe this, but my grandpa and grandma lived on a farm about 10 miles from town proper, and my grandpa would not go fishing on his own property without a fishing license. There was a creek back there, but nobody knew that. But grandpa kept about that much whiskey in a bottle to get his right mind back in the morning. If somebody would have accused him of being an alcoholic, he'd have went Hercules on him. I mean, that was so far removed from hard work, right and wrong, and all of that stuff. But that stuff won't move alcoholism any more than candy cigarettes. So anyway. So I went to live with my great aunt. Now, my great aunt was 75 years old in 1975. She followed the years, and I went into this elegant old neighborhood. My great aunt obviously spoke English, she spoke Spanish fluently, and she spoke German fluently. And she said, I have someone in mind who will take you to AA if you will go. So I start going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings every day, and while I've had a lot of trouble in my sobriety, my life has never been the same. This is what I was introduced to. I didn't get any of that stuff about relapse is inevitable and the door swings both ways and we don't shoot our dead and all that's good. You can come back, but I hate to see people play penny ante poker with AA. I mean, you ain't much of an alcoholic if you know what's going to happen when you take a drink. I mean, who's to say you're going to get a chance to come back? I mean, I don't know. My experience with real alcoholics is most everybody in AA has probably been judged hopeless by somebody. I mean, AA is a last resort. AA is a court of last resort. I don't want to hit you with anything too heavy, but we don't have a referral out of AA. Like people refer to us, where would you send somebody? I mean, you can send them to the nut house or to prison or the doctor or the scrap heap, but we don't have any referral out of AA. Everybody refers to us. I mean, if you get to AA, pretty much a bottom feeder. I mean, think about it. One of my favorite statements in all of Alcoholics Anonymous history. I had been saying for years that this came from Bill Wilson, but somebody corrected me after I did a workshop in Chapel Hill, and they said it came from Bernard Smith. He was an early non-alcoholic leader. He did a lot of writing for us. I believe he was an attorney by profession. It really doesn't matter where it came from. I thought it came from Bill Wilson, but it's one of my favorite statements. He said, "Lest we ever forget, always remember that Alcoholics Anonymous is a society made up of colossal failures transformed by the grace of a loving God." It's always good for me to keep that in mind, and this is a good place to run a little green in awe of the gift. I've noticed the smart ones don't stay here quite so long. And it's awfully easy. I've got this idea that people in AA, maybe all of us, and it could be one of those ideas that isn't true, but it looks like it's true to me. It's very easy to underestimate the illness of alcoholism. From drinking alcoholics underestimate it, and practicing alcoholics underestimate it. I believe that there's parts of alcoholism we don't quite understand, or we can't quite reach, or we can't quite touch. There's a diabolical nature to alcoholism. I think we'd all agree that alcoholism is an abnormal reaction to alcohol. It's also an abnormal reaction to abstinence. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. It's about learning how to live, practicing these principles. But anyway, so I got sober, and I got sober, and I didn't work much the first year. Did a little bit of work, not much. They made a guy in a junkyard give me a job. Now, I can't fix anything. I can't. If I throw the switch on something and it don't go, I'm done. If I get a flat tire, trust me on this. There's no embellishment on this. I'm done until somebody gets there. I sponsor 2 contractors. One of them has been swearing for years that I called him over to my house to change a light bulb. I don't think that's true. I think he was already there. And it wasn't just a regular light bulb. It was one of those long tube ones. Now, a while back, I broke a light off. You know, you break one off? And I called this contractor, you know him, Joey. I called Joey, and he's trying to explain to me how to get it out of there. I finally said, "Joey, I ain't taking it out. I don't care how long you talk about how to do that, Joey. Trust me on this." He said, "All right, I'll come by tomorrow and take it out." It's what I wanted him to do anyway. But anyway, that was not a good job for me. Here's what happened. This wouldn't happen now. By the time I left the Department of Correction, how I got to North Carolina in 1989, Tom Ivester recruited me to come here and work in the prison system. But how I went to work in the court system in January of 1977, and I went to work with state probation in a new clinic. And I didn't have any of the qualifications. So here I am on Sunday. I'm fat, dumb, and happy. And on Monday in January of 1977, I was sworn in as an officer of the court. It was a great job. I stayed in that work for over 30-some years. Nebraska judges don't sentence people without pre-sentence investigations after an admission or a finding of guilt. And then supervised probation, you try to tell the judge whether we can handle them on the street or they need to put them in jail or prison or what to do. And so it's a great job. That wouldn't happen today. Didn't have any of the qualifications. I've had 3 jobs in my sobriety that amounted to everything. That job, the one between that and the prison system, and then I spent most of my adult work life in the prison system and in prison administration. I didn't qualify for any of those jobs. But I qualified for them. I remember Tom's daughter one time said, "Well, Dad must have saw something in you." I said, "Holly, I could do the work. I couldn't got the job. Your dad's the only person in the country who would have hired me for that job." But anyway, so what happened is I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings every day. I'm reading the big book once a week or so, and I was introduced to this idea right here, that this is what alcoholism is. This is what I was taught. Alcoholism means I can't live with drinking and I can't live without drinking. And there's 2 treatments. This doesn't make much sense. A lot of times people look at me like I got 2 heads. As far as I know, there's 2 treatments for the illness of alcoholism. One of them is alcohol, and the other one's Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason I say one of them is alcohol, you ever needed a drink really bad? Like, I mean, you can't even see straight? You get one to stay down, you'll straighten out for a little while. Now it's a short-lived intervention, but it'll work for a minute. So most of the treatment that's done in this country with the illness of alcoholism is done by alcohol. Well, that runs its course. So the Alcoholics Anonymous is the other one. So if I had to explain, I was taught that if I had to explain what Alcoholics Anonymous was, what I would say is the way of life. If practice is a way of life, it's slightly more powerful than the illness of alcoholism. If problems could make us drink, then AA would be a crapshoot instead of a miraculous gift. Because there's one thing AA can't do, is it can't stop life from coming at us. The more sober you get, the more life speeds up. You know, I mean, I just listened to a young man the other night talk about, I mean, he's been to prison several times. He comes from squalor. The last sheriff caught him with a cannon one night and let him walk. That sheriff was not a well-liked man, but he's well-liked by that guy. He'd known him all his life, and he said, get out of here and get that gun. You ain't supposed to have that gun. They could have charged him with being a habitual felon. He got sober about 15 years ago and got a job. Wasn't a very good job, but it was a job. And he's one of those people that can fix things. And in a couple of years, he started his own business. He's making a fortune. Got crews that work for him. But the important thing is he's become a leader in his family. And he told a story about he was the one holding his grandpa's hand when his grandpa passed away. He's the one his mom calls when she needs something. Well, that's the transformation is from not being allowed at a family dinner to being the leader of the family. What did that? There's only been one place. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. So I try to remember that the program is practiced as a way of life. Look, I could get drunk. Any alcoholic could get drunk. My sponsor's coming to speak at my birthday. He got sober in 72, so I guess he's going to be 53 years sober this year. He could get drunk. Any alcoholic that's breathing could get drunk. I could get drunk. But I'm not going to just walk off and get drunk. The book says repeatedly, it uses the term recovered. A couple places it says from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and one place in the book it says from a hopeless state of mind and body. So what I would have to do if I were to get drunk since I've recovered is I'd have to pull out, right? I'd have to get away from you folks. Not just literally tonight, but I'd have to get away figuratively. For me to know what I know about the illness of alcoholism, I mean, the book is clear about that. Our founders went to great length to explain that self-knowledge avails us nothing. So this is just my take, but the biggest jump in the program in my mind has always been from step 1 to step 2. I try to move people out of that first step quick. I mean, it's the step that'll get you under the tent, but it's a terrible place to hang out. I mean, you've just admitted that it's hopeless. What the first step says essentially is you can't make it drinking and you can't make it not drinking. So if powerlessness is the problem, then power is the answer. So if I pony up to the second step where the power is, that's a step of hope. And if you've ever lived without hope, that's a tough way to live. You ever look in the eyes of somebody that's not there? That's why sometimes those guys are on prison yards, and sometimes it's even the personality kids with the big mouth. When you look in their eyes, I mean, you know, I suppose everybody knows, and probably singing to the choir on this, but when our founders use the word death, they're not always talking about your heart stopping pounding. They're talking about like a spiritual death. For like Daniel's been sober a long time. For him to take a drink, there's got to be some kind of a spiritual death experience. And if you ever get around like where homeless people, like around a rescue mission, that's why I've always thought if you pull up one of those men or women, engage them in conversation, you don't have to be talking to them more than about 30 seconds as they start talking about what they used to be. Like I was a paratrooper stationed at Fort Bragg in 1980 or whatever it is, or you know, I have a daughter that's at Duke, that kind of stuff, and oftentimes it's true, but they're always living somewhere else because everything's gone now. There is no hope. The dreams are gone. So anyway, I get sober and start going to AA meetings. I get this job, and And my life has never been the same. I mean, I've made all the mistakes here anybody else has made here. I got married the day I was sober 2 years. I thought it was a long time. When I was sober 2 years, I thought I'd been sober forever. I was at a meeting one time, and I don't know how this happened because it's a very unusual thing, but I never can remember this whole scenario, but the woman chairing the meeting asked this guy how long he'd been sober. And he said, long time, 30 days. And I thought, that's right. That is a long time. So I got married the day I was sober 2 years. The judge who married us opened the courthouse at night and mounted the bench and married us. And a guy told me to quit saying, Moyo told me to quit saying that it was a marriage that never should have happened. He said, just say boy met girl on AA campus, because the reason not to say that is I got kids and grandkids with that woman. But kids were born in Alcoholics Anonymous. I raised them in AA, never seen me take a drink. All my grandkids, my youngest granddaughter's 13 now. My 25-year-old granddaughter's been traveling the world for the last 3 years. I ain't got a lot of money, but a lot of the money I had went to help and get her educated. She got an office in London. She flew me to London. I thought that was nice. But life has went on. Now, I've made about every mistake. There's a couple of mistakes that I haven't made in Alcoholics Anonymous. I think there's 3 of them I can point to. Probably the most, I've never taken a drink since I got sober. Self-evident truth, right? Since I got sober, I got a sobriety date, never taken a drink. I've never quit going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I'm a firm believer that meetings are foundationally important, but the truth of the matter is they're just one thing we do in AA. In fact, I've kind of tempered this a little bit. For years I was saying that we're over-identified with meetings in AA, that AA is really a way of life and meetings are just one thing we do. While that's true, that Zoom business kind of got me away from that. That Zoom might have been a good thing that helped us survive that period of time, but it's a lousy second. Terrible second. And the other mistake I've never made is I've never trusted the wrong person. AA is a very unusual place because you get to pick your leaders. If you think about that, there's hardly any place in the world you get to pick. I had some management training one time that said if you work for a man or woman, if they're your boss, and you wouldn't hire them if the shoe was on the other foot, you're going to have trouble every time. They said you can do it, but it's going to be a problem. Well, most of us aren't in a position to decide who your boss is. You get a job and then you got a boss. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, we get to pick our sponsor. So I've never made a bad decision on that. I've had the best of that. I don't ever know of having a confidence violated. To my knowledge, I've never had one violated, which is it's a pretty critical thing. I mean, if you're a person who has to tell people what you know, you probably shouldn't be hearing many fifth steps. I've heard my share of fifth steps. I'm pretty sure there isn't a crime. I don't think there's anything I haven't heard. I don't think that would be, there are no new sins or no new crimes. Probably what church people would say about, they would probably say that we're punished for our sins. I think in AA we would have a different outlook on that. I think we would say that we're punished by our defects, not for them. But that what we do, I guess I could explain it like this. I learned a long time ago that whatever I send out comes back. Trash out, trash back. And the way I can prove that is all the years of my drinking. But it's a bad law that doesn't work both ways. It says in the book Alcoholics Anonymous that the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, has the power to actually kill. I've actually had people in prison that killed the wrong person. So resentment will kill whether it's focused properly or not. So, that carnage will come back. But it's a bad law that doesn't work both ways. Like, look, there's only, as far as I know, there's only two things we do in AA. I'm going to start to wrap up around this thought. Daniel gave a long introduction, the reason I'm talking. The guy chairing the meeting chaired long too. That's about the fastest I've got to the podium in a long time. Usually you get the podium about 10 or 11 after 8 or 7, whatever the meeting is. I got up here at 5 after. Lost my train of thought. I thought it was a good one. What was I talking about?
2 things in there.
Oh yeah, there's only 2 things we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's no way you could refute this. Everything we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, there might be 1,000 different things we do, but everything we do to stay sober or to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So I've had experiences with carrying the message. I gave a guy his last drink 49 years ago. Still sober as far as I know. Had all kinds. I had a front row seat at a law school graduation reserved for me. I've been the best man at a number of weddings. I've been flown across the country a number of times to do stuff at AA for no other reason than to sponsor somebody, and you're involved. Had all kinds of stuff like that happen. I went to, on my job, sent me to the Institute of Justice in Washington, D.C. to a think tank. I got in there was only 10 people in the think tank. They sent for Tom, they ended up with me. I mean, I sent for a man, they got a boy. But anyway, this is when I got in there, this guy says, "You recognize Mark?" I said, "No, I don't recognize that. That's Mark?" And he said, "Yeah, he's on the O.J. Simpson trial. He was the chemist for the FBI." And also at that think tank was was the FBI agent who dealt with John Gotti while Gotti was in detention before he got convicted of murder the last time. So I've had all kinds of experiences like that happen for no other reason than Alcoholics Anonymous. But if it is true, and I think it is, that everything we do is to stay sober, to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers, if I've tried to help somebody and they die drunk, or they're now in prison, as far as for me, that's been a success. Because I ain't got any power to get anybody sober, and I sure don't have any power to get anybody drunk. So, but my job is to carry the message. I'm of the mind like this. Shut this thing down. I'm of the mind like this. I haven't heard anybody say this in a long time. I hope nobody ever says this. It's a terrible thing to say. But I've heard people say that if they were to leave AA, it wouldn't hurt AA, but it would hurt them. That's not true. It's not true. The only way that would be true if there was 2 of you. I have this idea. I guess it's a little bit of an arrogant idea. Maybe it presupposes God. But I have this idea. Did you say your name's Freddie? You introduced yourself to me outside? Okay, I'll just use you for an example. I have the idea that there's somebody, I don't know who it is, I have no idea, that there's somebody that needs to hear what he has to say, not what I got to say. They might have heard what I have to say 100 times, and for whatever reason. But there's somebody that he can capture and get under the tent if he's here. Now, I think that holds true for all of us. The only way somebody in this room wouldn't be necessary if there was 2 of you. I mean, that's like saying that your alcoholism doesn't count. There's probably other ways to make sense out of my past, but the best way for me to make sense out of it is to help somebody else with it. I'm uniquely positioned to work with knuckleheads just like me. So I think that we need to stay here, we need to take our place here, and we need to try to carry the message, because who would be better qualified to do it than somebody who's escaped the, So anyway, I appreciate you inviting me, Daniel, and I just say this in closing. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was so beaten down and so desperate, I would have settled for table scraps. But what I got instead was a seat at the table with the king. Thanks for listening. 4 minutes early, Dan.